So this video is the first in the series that my students actually requested. There were a few topics in math that they had remembered having difficulties with, so I thought I would make a few little videos, and this one is long division. That seems to be one of the most popular things that students struggle with. So in this video, I'm just going to tell you what are some of the skills you need to know in order to be successful at long division. I'm going to give you a couple of sort of tips and shortcuts, and then I'm going to give you the long steps, which everybody knows, and we're going to talk about it a little bit. Like, do you really need to know it? Here's some background noise. It's because I've got my windows open and I live near a highway. It's a beautiful day though, and I just can't leave the windows closed. I love it. In learning long division, you're going to need some prior skills. And the better you have these skills down, the easier it is to learn long division. Number one, you need to know your basic multiplication facts. Just your single digit multiplication is fine, but if you go beyond 1 through 9, go all the way to 15 and memorize those facts. That makes multiplication in different situations easier, and it makes long division a lot easier. The more you have as fingertip facts, the easier it is to do the more complex math. Understanding something called groups of language. So instead of just thinking 3 times 2 is 6, think 3 groups of 2 is 6. It gives you more of a mental picture of what's happening. You're repeating the groups. You need to have basic division down, which is actually just multiplication backwards. So you've got 3 times 2 is 6. Well, 6 divided by 2 is 3. Or what times 2 makes 6? 3. So those sorts of skills, being able to fill in the missing factor in a multiplication statement, and then moving on to division, those are key in understanding what division is. And then understanding the language, like 6 divided into groups of 2 makes 3 groups. So you understand that when you're doing a long division, you're taking a large group and dividing it into groups of smaller amounts. And then the answer that's on the top of the little symbol there is how many groups you make. Understanding that with smaller numbers and then relating it to the larger numbers does make it a little bit easier. But again, you have to repeat these things so that it's easier to remember. Also, subtraction. Subtraction with regrouping, yes, is important for young kids to learn, but it's also important to understand what subtraction is so that when you have something like 40 minus 37, a student doesn't actually borrow from the 4 to put the 1 on the 0. Instead, just thinking, oh, 37, 38 through 9, 40. It's much, much easier. So yes, understanding the algorithms and the things, that the process that you do to subtract large numbers is important, but it's also just as important to understand when you have 2 numbers that are really close together, sometimes you can just look at it and see it. Practice that skill. And the more simple you can make your process, the easier it is. So why does long division work? Well, we're going to get into that. You don't actually have to understand why it works in order to be able to work it, in order to do it. It's kind of like your cell phone. I know how to make calls and do the apps and everything on it. Do I know how it works on the inside? Nope, absolutely not. But I can still work my cell phone. So sometimes just memorizing the process is how you go. Other people have to know why and how it works. So here's the why and the how it works. Take 945 divided by 9. In this symbol here, you've got the 9 on the outside. So it's basically 9 divided into 945, or 945 divided by 9. That might have no meaning to your students. That's something you might understand. Divided by might have no meaning, but divided into groups of has more meaning. So what this is 945 divided into groups of 9. So you're making tiny little groups of 9 out of this large pool of 945 things. The first step is to divide, obviously, into the 9. Well, why do you do that? Well, because you're thinking of how many groups of 9 are in 900. Well, that's easy. There's 100 groups of 9 in 900. And so you put the 1 over the 9. It's a place value thing. And then you only subtract that 900ths place because you haven't done anything with the 45 yet. You bring down the 4. 9 doesn't go into 4, and so you bring down the 5. And now you're thinking how many 9s are in 45. Well, that's one of those basic facts. Just like 9 goes into 9 once, 9 goes into 45 5 times. Then all I have to do is take the 100 and add the 5, and you get 105 as your answer. So if you take 945 and divide it into 945, divide them both by 9, you've got it, and you can do this division in your head. You could also do 900 divided by 9, and then 40 divided by 9, and then 5 divided by 9. The problem with that is that 4 is not divisible by 9, and neither is 5. So that makes that last part a little bit more complicated. Put them together and look at 45 divided by 9. So when you look at the number that's under the division symbol, think of it in terms of, is any of that divisible by 9? Well, 900 is divisible by 9, 45 is divisible by 9, so 9 goes into 900 100 times, and 9 goes into 45 5 times, so you have 105. That's what it is. You're dividing it into place value portions. And so these are the steps you were taught in school. And here's also, I'm going to also explain why, which learning long division, the first thing you do is divide it into the highest place value. In this case, we've got 12 divided into 25,296. So 25,296 divided into little groups of 12. So we're first going to take 12 into the 20,000. But because it doesn't go evenly into 2, we're going to actually switch that and take it into 25,000. Because I can do 12 into 25. The trick to making long division easier is not to guess how many times it goes, but to make a list of the factor or the multiples of 12, and then you can actually check it. So when I'm teaching my students how to do long division, I have them do a multiples list, and I have them start by just going the first 5 multiples. You might need to go beyond that, but usually the first 5 is all you need, and then you can save yourself a little time. So here's the first 5 multiples of 12. So then you think, how many 12s are in 25? Well, you can see that there's a 24, and you go with the one that's one less than what you're dividing into. I'm dividing into 25. Less than 25 is 24, and that's the closest one. Which multiple is it? It's the second multiple. So therefore, I put a 2 above the 5 in 25 because I'm taking it into 25. So now I know that 12 goes into 25,000 more than 2,000 times. 2 times 12 is 24. I put the 24 below the 25, and it actually stands for 24,000. You can put the zeros on the end of it and subtract it that way. This just saves you a little bit of time, and it keeps your long division area a little cleaner. That's another tip. Make sure you keep your columns straight and that you keep your writing in between the little blue lines on the paper. It is helpful to use graph paper when you're doing long division because you can keep your numbers and your columns straight. Next thing you do is you subtract. 12 goes into 25,000 more than 2,000 times. And 2,000 times 12 is 24,000. So now I'm going to take those 24,000 out and see what remains. Well, it's going to be 1,000 something that remains. Bring down my next place value, which is my hundreds place. So, and then I do my division again. You're going to repeat these steps over again. So 12 goes into 12 once. I put a 1 above the 2, and then I multiply it, and I subtract it. I get 0. I bring down my next place value. Now here, my next place value is 9. So now I have to take 12 into 9. 12 doesn't go into 9. I put a 0 above the 9 because 0 times 12. Then you can multiply 0 times 12 and subtract 0 and bring your 9 down again. It's just easier to go ahead and just bring the next place value down, which is 6. And you'll end up dividing into 96 anyway. Well, my multiples list only goes to 60. So I'm going to need to extend it to 96. And 96 is a multiple of 12. It's 12 times 8. So I put the 8 above the 6. And you can go ahead and multiply through and see that you subtract and you get 0. So you're taking the division, you're doing it in sections. You're dividing into the largest place value first. You're subtracting to get all that's left down, and then you are dividing into what's left, and then you multiply, see how many times it goes in. You multiply, you take those multiples out, and you see what's left, and you see what's left, and you see what's left. There are multiplications that can be done in which it doesn't go evenly. This happens to go evenly, which I set it up that way. But you might have remainders, which you can turn into fractions or into decimals. You might have a decimal in your division. And in that case, the steps are the same. You just have to know where to put your decimal place. And if you have remainders, your steps are the same. But once you get to the end, if you have a number, you put the remainder, however many is left over. Because the number, you can't make an even group of 12 on all of them. So you would have one group that doesn't have 12 in it. It would have less than that. So let's say this was 25,297. Then you would have one left over, and you would have 2,108 groups of 12 and one little thing left over. That's basically what long division is and how you do it. The key to learning long division and any other skill is to use that skill and to practice it a lot. The more you practice it, the easier it is to remember it. So you think of any sports player. If they've got a skill that they do, even the kicker on a football team, they only bring them out when they want to kick a field goal. That kicker has one job, and guess how many times they do it in practice? They do it a lot so that when they're on the field, they can do it exactly as they've practiced it. You have to do those skills over and over again. It starts to become more natural to you that way. Practice it in different contexts, and once you get it down at one context, gradually increase the difficulty. There are a lot of explainer videos out there on YouTube. I've looked. That's why I didn't decide to do a really in-depth one. This is a question I got a lot when I was in the classroom. Why not just use a calculator? Why do you really need to know how to do it by hand? It's a fair question because long division takes a lot of paper. It takes a lot of time. And a calculator is a much more efficient use of your time. The trouble is, do you know which number would go in first? You would type into your calculator first because it makes a difference when you're dividing which number goes in first. And understanding a skill and when to use it all comes by knowing how it works. You don't actually have to understand long division to use a calculator to do it, but you have to understand what division means. So if we'll take the 25,296 divided by 12. If you are putting that into a calculator, one way you're going to get the answer that you want. The other way you're going to get a really freakishly long decimal. So when you're using a calculator, you have to know when to put the numbers in, which button to push, because a calculator doesn't actually do any thinking for you. It just does what it's told. It's programmed to divide if you hit the division button, and to take the first number you type in and divide it into groups of the second number that you type in. That's how it's programmed. It doesn't think for you. It doesn't think, oh, they must have meant this. It only does what it's told. So if you don't understand what's being divided into pieces and how many pieces are in each group, the calculators might do you some good, and you might actually use the calculator incorrectly. Also, another thing that is a lot of people overlook these days, and actually forever, is that doing difficult things increases your ability to think through and understand difficult topics. And when you have to work through something that is difficult, it teaches your mind that, number one, you can work through something that's difficult. And number two, when you work through something that's difficult, you gain more knowledge. Now, if I had to do a huge division like 25,296, would I use a calculator? Yes, I would. But I also kind of get a kick out of trying to do it in my head. So I might try to do it in my head, but then I would check it on the calculator because the calculator is faster. It's more efficient. And I know which number I should type in first. If you're a student learning how to do division, it is important that you do it by hand and you understand how it works by hand before you use the calculator. This has been Safety in Numbers Math Teaching, learning the math basics. I'm Sheila Hanson. I'm your hostess, and thank you for watching today.